Good evening. My name is Buddy Ross, and I'm a retarded spouse of an Al-Anon. I also have a dual problem. I'm an alcoholic and an Episcopalian, for you, Father. And it's been my great pleasure and my miracle that it's not been necessary for me to have a drink or any mood-changing chemical since the 26th of April of 1976. And that's about 11 and a half years ago. And I've had miracle after miracle after miracle in my life happen. And before I get into this, I'd like to say I've never trusted anybody that could do the preamble from memory. I'm glad you couldn't do it with that. I'm so glad that our conference theme is happy, joyous, and free, because that's what Beverly and I enjoy. I guess we've run more people off from our group because we're happy, joyous, and free most of the time. And if anybody comes to our home group that wants to stay sick, I've got news for them. They're just not going to do it around us because we laugh them out of the place. And I met a young lady this afternoon that is 1 month old today in our fellowship, and I hope she's having as much fun with her first 30 days as I did with mine. And I hope she'll keep coming back. And, honey, if you don't have fun this weekend, you don't have anybody to blame but yourself, because this is an up convention, and they've got good speakers coming up. It's after me. And you're just in for a real treat. You're probably going to find the most exciting thing that's ever happened in your life. And if you don't, keep coming back and listen to the music till you can understand the words, because it's all here. I met a beautiful, vivacious, absolutely exhilarating woman on January the 2nd of 1942. I fell in heat with her. We married on June the 18th of 1948, and in the last 10 years, because of the AA recovery program and the Al-Anon recovery program, we've learned how to love each other. And I'd like for my I'd like for my wife, Beverly, to stand up so that you can see. I'm going to take her inventory in a minute. I do want to thank Dan and Linda and whoever else was responsible for inviting me. This is absolutely one of the greatest thrills in my life, next to going to Russia, which I'll cover in a little bit, that I've had, because it never seemed that I would be able, 10 years ago when I came to my first tri-state, that there would ever be a chance for me to be a speaker with my name on the program. And Dan, I'm forever grateful for you giving me this opportunity to share my experience and strength and hope. The hotel is great. I like it since they've revamped it, and the Gideon Bible in our room is offering a service. I don't know if anybody else says this, but I was going through it last night, and there's a notation on the front, you know, where it says for if you're depressed or, you know, various subjects where you can go and pick up a page and read something in the Bible. And there was scribbled in one of the things, if you're lonely and depressed, read, and it had a page number and everything. And I looked over there and read the article, and it wasn't much, but down at the bottom it said, if you're still lonely and depressed, call Mabel at 631-92. And I love that picture of our spiritual advisor out there in the hall. And I heard that Dan is getting ready to start a halfway house for women that won't go all the way. I've been trying for 3 years to get him. I finally did. I tell you, looking out here and the beautiful faces that I see, my God, you're beautiful. And Franklin Williams always says this, and I love to say it, you're a beautiful-looking people, group of diseased people. And I'm glad you're here. And our fifth tradition, I believe, says that a group's primary purpose is to, carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers. And I suffer from untreated alcoholism on a regular daily basis, and you give me the cure for it, and you give me the solution. And that's what I'm here about tonight, is to share some of that with you, and I hope some of it, if you want it, why, please take it and try it. It's certainly worked well in my life. I'll say this, outside of meeting my wife in 1942 and the children that we had from that marriage, everything good that's happened to me has happened in the last 11 and a half years since I found your fellowship. And I believe that everything good is going to continue to happen to me as long as I stay close to you and our 12-step recovery program of AA and Al-Anon. You know, the big book says to tell how we were, what happened, and how we are now. And I was a spoiled brat. I was born in 1923. That math makes me almost 64. I was born in December. My parents were elderly by my standards. I believe I was a menopause miracle. I may have been on my mother's last cycle before she went into the menopause. I don't know. My father was 52. I had a grandparent relationship with them. I never played baseball or anything with my father, and I glory in the fact that my oldest boy, who's 37, our firstborn, is an American Airlines pilot, and he stays with us when he's in town, and we are having the most beautiful relationship today, and again, that relationship has been healed because of what you all have given me here. And the steps and the way to live, I heard somebody call AA remedial living, and I believe that. Because it's given me a chance to change my value systems. And I don't have a single value system that's the same today that I had 11 years ago, or 11 and a half years ago when I came here. Through the steps, you have helped me get a whole new attitude about life and given me, well, anyway. Getting back to my childhood, I was spoiled rotten. We got one of the first electric refrigerators in Fort Worth. I'll be very brief about this because really my drunk-a-log is about as exciting as watching paint dry. And I want to get into the exciting part of my life, which is my recovery. And we got one of the first electric refrigerators in Fort Worth, and it had a light that went off when they shut the door. It said. I did not believe that, and my mother took the shelves out so I could crawl inside the refrigerator and she could shut the door, and I could see that the light turned off. One year I cried when they started to take the Christmas tree down in February, and they left it up till June with the lights burning every night. This 37-year-old infant that is our firstborn son, we came home and my mother was babysitting one night, and a rocking chair was on top of our very sturdy dining room table, and we asked her what it was up there for. She said, well, Trace wanted to be rocked up there, and so she got up on top of that thing and rocked him. Now, I was spoiled. I don't think I need to give you any more case histories about how spoiled I was. My parents loved me. I did not come from an unloved home. I believe I came from a home that by some standards today would be called a dysfunctioning home, but I got all the love that they could give me, and they gave me everything I wanted, and just kept doing. They gave me a car, the beautiful convertible Chrysler that I had that trapped Beverly. And they sent me off to military school. They hawked the family jewels, so to speak, to send me to school. And I didn't know that, but I believe if I had, I'd have still gone because I'm selfish and self-centered, just like I've always been. But when I met Beverly, I'll go back. I didn't have any problem with alcohol in high school. I don't remember when I drank till I got to the service. That's not exactly important, but when I met Beverly, she was young, she was straight up and down, she had braces on her teeth, she was not much to look at, but she fell in love with me and set her eyes on me, and she went off to camp one summer, and that summer she gained 30 pounds, and it was all up here. She says she was blessed by the chest fairy. And I believe I was blessed by the chest fairy too, but this happened when she was away for 8 weeks at a summer camp up in Wisconsin. She came home and her mother and I met her at the train. Her mother cried and I was apoplectic. And that's when she got me. I mean, there wasn't any chance for me to go anyplace else, and we've had a beautiful relationship most of the time, except when I was drinking, which was about 25 years. Fortunately, we both have good sense of humor, and I believe we laughed our way through 27 years of a sick marriage. And we never lost our sense of humor at the same time. When I was out of it, she was laughing, and when she was out of it, I was laughing. I believe that was the only thing that kept us together. And pride, because we didn't want anybody to know that we were having trouble. In fact, I was unemployed a lot of the time. This is into our early marriage, and she would get the kids out, and they would line up and wave goodbye to me. I'd get in the car and drive out And they say, "Goodbye, Daddy, have a good day at work, and we'll see you tonight, Daddy." Very loud voices, so the neighbors could hear that. Now, the only problem was I didn't have a job. But her denial was so advanced that she had to have me out of the house from 8 to 5 or 9 to 5 because other people's husbands were gone from that time, and I was instructed to go to the library or someplace. I usually ended up at a bar or back in bed. And she would come home from school. She was a teacher. I was a functioning alcoholic. A functioning alcoholic is someone whose wife is working. My family business went broke after only 2 years of my marvelous leadership after my father died. I went through a lot of jobs. I had about 10 different jobs over a short period of time, and my mother-in-law today says that I'm more qualified for more things than anyone she knows, and I do not believe she means that as a compliment. Anyway, in about 1972, I was beginning to drink in the morning, just a little bit, and her brother was a real estate broker, and I was attending the real estate office. I wasn't doing any work there. But I would go in there in the morning, I'd leave at lunch, I would come back with liquor on my breath. Well, now our family, Beverly's family, totally different system from the one I was reared in. Her father Eddie would talk to her father or would talk to Beverly, then she would talk to me and tell me what I was doing wrong. He never approached me directly. And I don't know about anybody else, but nobody ever told me I drank too much directly. I was niced out of more jobs than you'll ever believe. Then they eliminated one job classification rather than fire me. They just said it was no longer a job in that area. They just totally shut that department down. And that happened to me over and over and over again. Nobody would tell me what the problem was. Buddy, you just drink too much. And if they had told me that, I would have complied with them and said, yeah, you're right, I probably do, and one of these days I'm going to do something about it. And then when I'd leave them, I'd say, well, I'm not going to get around them anymore. I don't want to hear that. And that's the way I went. I complied, and I was very nice, but if you told me about my drinking, I didn't like you anymore. Anyway, Beverly confronted me with the fact that they had asked her to tell me that they didn't like me coming back to the real estate office after lunch with alcohol on my breath, and that had to stop. And it did. I quit going back after lunch. And soon I was down into but at that time, that was in around April of 1972, I made my first pass at this leper colony. I went to the Harbor Group in Fort Worth, and there were several reasons I went there. One was that I liked to take a nap after lunch, which was 4 bourbon highballs, 2 pieces of dry toast, and a glass of buttermilk. Now, I've never figured out what the buttermilk was doing in there, but anyway, and then I got a little drowsy, and I would lay down and sleep a while, and our in-laws' home was 2 blocks away, and my father-in-law could see our driveway with the car there, and he started asking Beverly why I was there at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Well, I got a lot of flack from that, so I went down to the Harbor Group, and I walked in there and talked to a couple of ladies. It was my first evening there. And they said, do you have a problem with alcohol? And I said, not really, but I'm beginning to drink in the morning. I just wanted to find out how I could go till happy hour to drink. And they said, well, we don't have a 16-hour program. I realized I'd committed a grave tactical error by doing that. And I went for about 6 weeks, I think. I memorized the steps. Didn't work them, but I memorized the steps. I remember I liked step 3 because the God as I understand was a big deal, and I'd been very active in my church. And if I could have gooded my way into sobriety by activity in the church, I'd have made it. But we know that you can't good your way into something like this. And so I went back out. And that's when my kamikaze drinking started. And that's when I started drinking around the clock. I was drunk all the time. Beverly talks about coming in, getting up and sneaking around the house in the middle of the night. And she would go to sleep just totally worn out from taking care of me all day. And I would get up and sneak into the kitchen where I had a stash. And I would just be fixing myself a drink, and she was very, very cruel. Very, very cruel to me. I've suffered from Al-Anon brutality. And she would wait till I got the drink right up to my lips, just getting ready to touch it. And then she would switch the light on, and she'd say at the top of her voice, Buddy Ross, what in the hell do you think you're doing? Of course, I would just throw it every way. And that's the only time I ever had the shakes when I was drinking, was when she caught me, And I would turn to her, and I used alcoholism as a defense for a long time. I'd say, Beverly, I'm a hopeless alcoholic, and I'm having a drink. And she would swell up, and she would say, you're not an alcoholic? At the top of her voice, you're not an alcoholic. I don't want to ever hear that word in this house. and you get back to bed. And I weighed about 280 pounds at that time, and I was no match for her. She'd grab me by the seat of the pajamas, and she'd hustle me off across the thing, and if you've ever heard her story, you know that she was highly motivated by studies on sex and all that. And about halfway through, she'd say, "You want to have sex?" And I said, "God, that was the last thing in the world I wanted to have at that time." And I'd get to bed, and that just repeated over and over for about 4 or 5 years. And I was drinking around the clock. If you saw me standing and I was awake, I'd had a drink in the last hour. And it finally got to the point where on the 24th of April of 1976, I was sitting in a bar. Now, Beverly never really chewed me out about drinking, and I could come in drunk and she'd never say much about it, but she had started counting my drinks. So I would stop by Andy Capp's, which was the Pink Elephant was where it was. Excuse me. And I would have 4 drinks that she couldn't count. It was very important for me to get those drinks down, and lots of times I had to get in training for parties we were going to that evening, and so then I'd go home, you know. Well, anyway, that day I had the moment of sanity that I guess I've heard everyone talk about, and for about maybe half a minute, I knew suddenly that what I was doing, now I was at death's door and didn't know it, weighed 280 pounds. I've looked at my driver's license picture since then, and it looked like a corpse on a slab. I mean, just terrible. And I looked at this guy that I drank with, talked to him. He was a lay Episcopal minister, and I said, "Jesse, you know, this drinking's killing me. I'm going to lose I didn't have a job, but I was attending work at a place, but I'm going to lose my job and my family." And I, to this day, do not know why this was important, but my country club membership was going to go, and I don't know why I was worried about that, but that seemed to be of a high priority at the time. And I said, I think I'm going to have to quit drinking, and I need to go someplace and dry out. I knew, and I'd heard somewhere, that if you change your habits for 21 days, that you get a new habit. So I thought if I'd go to the hospital or something, never thought about calling AA, never gave you all a thought. Just, you were totally out of it. And I said, I'm going to have to go to the hospital. And so I went back to drinking that weekend. I had a horrible drunk. I believe that's the weekend that I had my first real attack of uncontrolled rage. My brother-in-law, who I didn't particularly like anyway, had 2 big dogs that attacked me. I was very angry at them. If I could have found a shotgun, I'd have killed everything in sight. If it moved, I'd have shot it. I mean, I've never been that enraged. Monday morning, I was in a total fear attack. It took me 30 minutes after a sales meeting at this office where I was attending to get up enough strength to call my doctor to make an appointment to see him. I knew I'd reached the end of the line. And I believe I had finally made a decision that I did not want to drink anymore. I called him up, and they said, well, you can't come in until his receptionist said you can't come in until Friday. But she got the anxiety in my voice, said, you come in at 1:15. I'll work you in ahead of the regular patients. I went in there, and here's my doctor of 20 years, and he bounces in. We're social friends, drinking friends. And he bounces in. Here I am, this fat, bulbous hunk of lard sitting there on this table. And he says, well, buddy, what's wrong? And I said, Gordon, I'm a hopeless alcoholic, and I've got to go someplace and dry out because I do not want to drink anymore. He said, oh, great. Well, I said, now you can go to this place down in Center Point, Texas, that you can go there for a month. It's real good, I hear. And I knew Beverly didn't have enough money to send me there, because I didn't have any money. But I figured her hospitalization from the school system would pay for me to go to the hospital. He said, I can put you in a semi-private room for a week or two and get you detoxed. The first time I'd heard that word. And then I'll get you out of the hospital. I'll get you medically free of alcohol. But I want to tell you this. If you want to enjoy your life without booze, you're going to need to go to AA. Oh, well, that was the biggest relief. My God, I swelled up, and I said, that'll be no problem. I know that program well. I've been there 4 years. I've even got a big book. I'll just fit right in. Hell, I'll be president in a year. Well, I went to the hospital for a week. I detoxed. I never had any discomfort. I was totally comfortable. I got out on a Tuesday night, and he did two things. He gave me a prescription of antabuse, which I asked for because I did not want to drink. I was willing to use anything at my disposal not to drink. And he gave me some, almost, if you could get such a thing, an open-end Valium prescription. And he said, buddy, you just go ahead and see, he also had me on Dilantin. David was talking about the girl that died that got taken off for Dilantin, an anticonvulsant. So I went home armed with that. Well, in 3 days, I was driving worse than I'd ever driven when I was drinking. I mean, I was hitting curbs. I was doing everything. I called him up and I said, I can't stand these green pills or whatever color they are. And he said, well, just stop taking them. He said, if you get nervous, why take some? And from that day till now, I've never had to use those pills. But one day, Beverly was giving me a real hard time, and I gave her one. So anyway, it did quiet her down a little bit. I was in the harbor group one day, 30 days dry, and a man came in and I was talking to him and I was absolutely elated. I was euphoric. I was on cloud nine because I wasn't drinking anymore. At the same time, I was absolutely miserable because I had no friends. I didn't know who I was going to have to go out with. I couldn't go to wedding receptions and drink anymore. Who would have anything to do with me since I wasn't drinking? All of these things, and I explained this to this guy. And he said, and I said, I've got 30 days sobriety, and this is the way I feel. He said, but he said, you've been dry 30 days. You don't have any sobriety. You won't have any sobriety till you start applying the steps in your life. What step are you on? I said, well, I guess I'm on step one. He said, well, have you got a sponsor? And I said, sort of. He said, well, get your sponsor and you start living these steps, trying to let these steps work you or whatever. I don't remember exactly what he said. Even though I had a light case of the disease, I was still in a little fog after 30 days. And so I got with my sponsor and I started working the steps of this recovery program. And I love to travel. And I know today that the reason I'm enjoying Alcoholics Anonymous so much is because I'm on the journey called sobriety. And it's the most exciting journey I've ever been on, and it won't end as long as I'm alive and keep coming here. And something new happens every day. I didn't know that then. But anyway, I got with my sponsor, and he asked me about being powerless over alcohol and my life being unmanageable. And I knew that I was powerless over alcohol, and I thought my life was unmanageable when I drank. And then I realized I drank because it was unmanageable or whatever it was, but I thought I was managing pretty well, because every time they shut our water down, I would go next door and hook up a hose to our neighbor's faucet, and pipe the water in so we could flush the toilets and have water to drink and so on, till we got the water bill paid. And I would either steal money out of Beverly's purse or just have her write me a check to go down to the water department and pay the bill, And so I thought I was managing well in that thing. I'm mechanically inclined, and when they shut our gas off and they put a seal in the meter, well, I had wrenches and stuff, and I'd watched them do that one time. That wasn't anything for this mechanic. I'd just go out there and take that seal out, hook that gas. We were never without heat over 15 minutes. I was managing well. I also had notes and quite a bit of bibliography set up for writing a book on how to stall creditors. And I was going to make $1 million with that. Now, today, it might work real well, I don't know if you all have heard this about the two girls walking in Texas. We have a little crisis with oil. These two girls were walking along this path, and this toad was down on the side of the path and says, kiss me, kiss me. This girl said, why should I kiss you? Said, well, I'm a Texas oil man, and this witch put a spell on me and turned me into a toad, and if you'll kiss me, I'll be a Texas oil man again. She picked that frog up and put it in her bag and walked along, and this other girl said, aren't you going to kiss him? She said, hell no. Said, talking frog's worth a lot more than a Texas oil man today. So anyway, chapter 11, or they say now when James Michener rewrites Texas, they want him to put Midland in chapter 11. I don't know if that's good. But anyway, that's kind of the way I was. I realized I was powerless and that my life was confused. And then I got to step 2, and God, I'll tell you what, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. You bet. You bet. But I wasn't crazy. But I had done some stupid things when I was drinking. Now, I realize today my insanity was the fact that I intellectually knew from my pre-medical studies, I was also before I ever drank, and this shows that I did not have a full string of lights running because I was reared in a Christian Science home and my burning desire was to be a doctor, And so I had gone to medical school and pre-med, made very good grades, and so I intellectually knew what alcohol was doing to my system and how it would destroy me. But see, I was an alcoholic, and I had the disease of alcoholism, and I was powerless over that stuff, and I kept drinking. Well, I believe you can give a nun or anyone that's never had any vodka or any booze in their life, give them a quart of something, and they will do some bizarre things. I really believe that they will. And I'll just relate one thing that I did. Now, bear in mind, the last 4 years I was drinking, I was never sober. I was never sloppy drunk. I was just in this kind of floating stage. If this is sober here, I had to be elevated up here with a drink every hour, or I would start going into withdrawal, I guess. And so I had heard Beverly say one day that she had been to the pet shop and that she had seen some Japanese hooded rats. Now, they are delightful little creatures, and she told me how beautiful they were, you know, and how they'd nibble your little fingers. I found out later they bite like hell if you're not good. And being a true alcoholic, and you know, if you're going to be an alcoholic, you've got to practice answers for questions that are never asked. I don't know if anybody else had that problem, but I had this whole repertoire of answers, and nobody ever asked me the questions. But I also wanted to get ahead of her and set her up where she owed me a favor in case I got in trouble, because I usually did. So I went down and got a male and a female rat. And I came home, and believe me, they multiply in geometric progression. Very short order, we had 185 rats and 10 Habitrail outfits housing them, little modular units with things between them where they could travel around. And we were very proud of those rats. Now, Beverly wasn't, but the rest of us were. And so one day, among other things, we also, you know, when you get them like that, there's incest like you wouldn't believe, and we had sex education every day. The kids would come in and watch the rats in various stages of development, breeding and incesting and whatever. And my roommate from college came in with two of his children, his two little daughters. One was about 7, the other was 5. Little Elizabeth was 5. We got to talking about the rats, and Beverly said, "Why don't you get one of the rats and bring it down here and show Elizabeth the rat?" I said, "Okay." And I kind of stumbled upstairs and got Edith, who was named after my mother. I don't know the significance of that, but I brought her down. And Edith was in some stage of pregnancy. They were all pregnant. I mean, it doesn't make any difference. If they were female, they were pregnant, you know. And so I was stroking Edith, and Elizabeth was enjoying her, and suddenly Edith decided to increase the rat population. And there you have umbilical cords, and they're in a little membrane sac that the mother licks off. Well, here suddenly I had 3 of them, just kind of hanging there, you know. God. And in my adult state, all I could think to do was try to shove them back where they were coming from, you know. That didn't work. The girls always love this. I just wrapped them up around the mother and took them upstairs, and she finished the job on her own. So I did bizarre behavior, but that was not insane. That was just crazy. Again, my insanity was drinking when I knew it would kill me. My activity in the church and my search for God gave me I never thought God of being a punishing God. The priest in the Episcopal Church, which I had joined because Beverly was an Episcopalian, had told me that it was a loving God. I didn't have any fear of a punishing God. And if I could have found God in the church, I wouldn't be up here tonight sharing with you. But I couldn't, because I'm an alcoholic and I have a disease, and I was blotting the sunlight of the Spirit out. But I was very pleased that I could have God on my own basis, God as I understand. So I didn't have any problem making a decision to turn my will and my life over to the care of God as I understood Him, or didn't understand Him, I realized. So that decision was made, and I realized that nothing happens till I get into action. So I went and did my first 4th step inventory, and it was an absolute disaster, because I did not do it according to the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. I got some outline or guide. It was more like a checklist, you know, and you just check this stuff off. And I thought agreeing with the steps was working them, you know. And so I went through this thing, and I went to one guy that gave me a list of the character defects, the 7 deadly sins like jealousy and anger and all that. And I would write down these things, and then I went to a priest who absolved me of my sins and heard my 5th step. And nothing happened. I just didn't get the relief that you liars had told me about. You'd get up here at the podium and tell me how good you felt after you did your 4th and 5th steps. That wasn't happening to me. I hadn't done it right. Well, I labored on that way for nearly a year. I thought I'd gone on with 6 and 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 and all like that. And I was bringing people into the program and, you know, taking people to meetings. And sometimes they didn't want to go to meetings, but they went with me anyway. And I didn't know they were supposed to ask me to come get them first, you know. And I'd go out and clean out a bar, say, "We're going to a meeting." "Okay," and they'd get in there, and then they'd find us AA, and they'd never speak to me again. But anyway, I was not very successful in getting people into the tent at that time. So anyway, about a year later, I was moping around the harbor group down there, and God, I was sober. I wasn't drinking because the best advice that they gave me when I first went in there said, regardless of what happens, do not drink. Not drinking, your sobriety comes ahead of your family, your job, everything. Do not drink. And I believed that. And I proved it to Beverly several times that my sobriety came ahead of her and the family and everybody else. And she was not going to Al-Anon. She did not understand me. In my terminal uniqueness, I could not make her understand me. And she did not need to go to Al-Anon, and they told me, do not ask her to go to Al-Anon. She was a very imperious, domineering person, And so anyway, I was down there at the club, at the group, and I was talking about this, and a beautiful, tall brunette came in named Sadie Ann, and she said, well, buddy, when you did your resentment list, what did you find? I said, what are you talking about? She said, that resentment list, right there on the page it shows you the first thing you do is make a list of your resentments. I said, I never did that. She said, you're supposed to have 3 lists when you get through. I am, yep. Well, you didn't do it right. Okay, now I'll tell you what, you come over next week, next Tuesday, and we're going to spend the whole day, and I'm going to walk you through this 4th step, the way it should be done, and you'll get the relief. Now, plan on spending the whole day with us. We're going to be alone. We'll break for lunch, but we're going to get this garbage out of your system. And I said, okay. I met her the next Tuesday morning. We were having a cup of coffee, and I said, Sadie, and I want you to understand that Beverly is not jealous. She has operated for years on the theory that she doesn't care who charges my battery as long as I'll start her car. And we're not jealous of each other. But Jim's my sponsor, and I'm not doing this 4th step with him. Let's just not tell him I'm over here by myself with you all day. And she said, put down devious and dishonest on your character defects list. So there it went. And God, I got the relief I was looking for. I found out that fear was the deal, that I had spent my entire life trying to control you so I would be comfortable. I found out, and she explained to me, that my anger and my character defects were just like a mechanic's tools, that by using them I could control Beverly so I would be comfortable. And then I couldn't do that anymore. And so we got into my fear list, and we got into the list of people I resented, which turned out to be my amends list also. And very quickly, I will go on through this because I do want to tell you about some exciting things that have happened this year in our life. Anyway, in step 9, I was able to make my financial amends slowly but surely, and that was no problem. My amends to my family, my daughter, my 3 sons, and Beverly had to be living amends, and I do not understand people. I told somebody recently, I said, I paid my water bill, and they, so what? God, it was a big deal for me to pay the water bill, and they pay their water bills just normal as hell. It doesn't bother them at all, but it was a big deal for me, and I expected people to react and tell me how great I was because I was just taking care of the normal responsibilities. But anyway, I had to amend the way I acted. It was not saying I was sorry. I had to change. And Doug DeBakey, that spoke here 3 years ago or 2 years ago, talked about when we make an amendment, we change something. When we amend the Constitution like Texas voted on this last week, we change the wording and we change something, and then we start doing it a different way, and we change our actions. And I had to amend a lot of my actions. One of them was finding fault. I criticized and I put Beverly down. I mean, that poor girl put up with more BS from me than you could believe because I was putting her down all the time. And she was just like mush under my feet. And so my sponsor said, you can't find fault with her anymore. The big book says, do not criticize or find fault. And I said, well, I've got to because she doesn't know how to do it if I don't tell her. And he said, well, you can't do it anymore. And I said, who's going to tell her? I don't know, but you can't. So he said, and I said, well, she burns food all the time. And I'd go in, and the only way she cooked was to shut off her full bore. I mean, there wasn't any medium simmer or anything. I mean, just smoke going everywhere. And he said, next time she's doing that, you can't go in and turn the fire off and tell her that you've turned it off again and not to do it, that was stupid, and only an idiot would burn food like that. You can't tell her that anymore. What do? If it's not a fire hazard, don't do anything. About 2 days later, I got my chance, and I walked in there, and here was smoke just in the kitchen. God, she had some beans on there, and they were really going. I looked it over. I bought an extra fire extinguisher, so it was there in the kitchen real handy. I checked everything out, the overhead, and it was okay. There weren't any flames, and I just got me the newspaper and fixed myself a glass of club soda and went in and started watching television. Now, when the smoke got so bad in the den where she couldn't see the TV, she realized something was burning, and she went in and turned it off. Do you know that she's only burned food one other time since then? Well, it seems, this is one of the paradoxes of the program, but when I quit finding fault, the fault went away. And she hadn't burned food in years. You know, it's just super good, you know. I couldn't believe it. And when I want my way at home, I just don't want my way, and then I get it. And you figure that out, you know. I forgot to tell you about steps 6 and 7 for just a minute. I thought that being humble was letting people walk on you. And, you know, the humiliating experiences we had. Well, one of the jobs that I had after I got defrocked from my piano business, the family business that went broke under my great leadership, was being a salesman for the Armored Car Service in Fort Worth. I also had to ride the trucks from time to time, which made it necessary for me to get a pistol. And so Mr. FBI went down and got a Smith & Wesson snub-nose revolver, got the chief of detectives to make me a holster, and I mean, I walked in, I was like these guys you see on TV now with the holster, and I had been at this military school where I went, I'd been on the championship rifle team. I was at one time a good shot under target conditions, under range conditions, you know. And one of the things we had to do was to put the peep sight, which is the rear sight of the rifle, and the front sight, the blade sight, in a candle flame to make it real dark, to carbon it up so you'd have a good target display when you're down there and squeezing those shots off. So I remembered that, and I could field strip things at military school. I'd learned to field strip rifles and things. And so I walked into this service station where I'd traded for years, and Bill Hood was the owner of the thing. I said, Bill, how do you like this? Don't I look like Mr. FBI? And he said, have you ever shot it, Mr. Ross? And I said, I don't need to. I'm an expert, and I could field strip this blindfolded. I don't need any experience. I know all I need to know about this. He said, really? He said, you've never fired it? And I said, no, but if I did, I'd do real well. Now, I was not the least bit cocky, you understand. And he looked me straight in the eye and he said, well, Mr. Ross, have you had the front sight filed off? No, Bill, I haven't. Does that make it shoot better? I was thinking about this candle routine, you know. He said, no, but it hurts less when they shove it up your ass. That's a humiliating experience. I've learned since then that humility means being teachable. I'd promised Dan I'd give my talk on humility if he could get a large enough crowd, but I'm sorry to say this is not quite big enough. In step 10, I thought for a long time that step 10 was when I screwed up. I'd just say, Beverly, I'm sorry I did that. And I didn't realize that I had to look for fear and dishonesty and all of those things that happened and review the day, and if I had done something, immediately make amends, call my sponsor, whatever. But I don't want to forget about my daughter. I really owed some living amends to her. She was happy I was not drinking, but she was flat torqued off at Buddy Ross. Because when she was in high school, she had a slumber party, and me and my splendiferous 280 pounds and a pair of skivvy drawers and a blackout had walked in one evening about 10:30 when she and several of her friends were having a slumber party, and they had their sleeping bags there. And for some unknown reason, yet unexplained to me, I had decided I was their pimp, and they were supposed to be out on the street peddling their wares. And I proceeded to chew them up one side and down the other, and my daughter never had another guest in our home until she left hurriedly, as soon as she could, to get into a very sick marriage that she's out of now, and she's into a good one that's Christian-oriented, and we have a delightful son-in-law now. But when she was pleased I wasn't drinking, but boy, she didn't trust old Dad. And have you ever hugged somebody when you knew they were being polite, but they didn't want to be hugged? You know, they just stiffen up, you know. I'd hug her, and boy, it was just like she had a poker in her back, you know. And so finally, after 3 years of practicing these principles as best I could, one night she called me, and she said, Dad, she called me from Arkansas where she's living. and said, I found a religious program up here. She had heard a tape of my talk at my first birthday celebration where I talked about the spiritual values that I had in my life at that time. And she had started going to church as a result of that, and she said, I'm in a spiritual program now, and Preacher Dick is what she called him, said that I cannot get what God has for me till I forgive you. And she says, I want you to know I forgive you for all you've done, and I love you, and I want to be Daddy's little girl now. Well, I cried, Beverly cried, she cried. I still almost cry when I talk about it because, my God, I thought it would never happen. You know, how long do you have to be in this program before you get amends? 3 years, my Lord. But today our relationship is just beautiful. When I hug her, I know she wants to be hugged, and she loves me, and our conversations today are like friends. What it's done, what the program has done, and through living these amends, has made my children my friends. And today, Beverly and I are the best friends in the world. I believe that's the foundation for our marriage at this date. But anyway, we're good friends. We talk about things, and it's a joy to be with them. And we have happy sounds in our home now. You know, Alateens say, how does it sound at your house today? Well, they're slamming doors and everything. Well, if you go by my house, you might want to call the guys in the white coats and the nets, because we're laughing all the time and just having a ball. And we just love each other, and we respect each other, and it's just a beautiful existence. Beverly and I do our step 11. I've got these kind of out of sync, but I want to move on. Some days we do our meditation together. Some days we don't. It just depends on how the feeling gets us. When I was new in the program in my first year, I wish you'd known me, I was getting ready to vault into the spiritual stratosphere. And I had books, God, I tell you, I had every book you could think of, you know, up one side and down the other and reading this and that, and I was getting squirrely as hell. So I just had to get back to the big book and the 12 and 12. Now, you'd think I would learn after doing that about 3 times. Every time I do it, I kind of get squirrely, and I say, back to basics, you know, keep it simple, and I have to go back and start over and throw all that other stuff aside. And I'm not saying it's not good. Buddy Ross just can't work with that. I've got to keep it real simple and real like the steps and the traditions, and that's what it is. So we do read one piece of not conference-approved literature called the Bible, and we read the Proverbs on a daily basis. And we take the chapter in the Proverbs for the day of the month, and we do that every month, and it gives us a good, it's kind of a good deal. We like it. And then we'll talk about things, and that may be 5 minutes, or it may be an hour, or it may be at noon. We don't have any regular time. Beverly's much more regular about it than I am. And then, of course, in step 12, which is where I'm so interested and so excited about what's happening in my life, because it says, having had a spiritual awakening, and I have, because I'm excited. God, I'm happy. It's great. Having had a spiritual awakening, we tried to carry this message to other alcoholics. I just realized the other day there's a comma there, and practice these principles in all our affairs. What I interpret that to mean today is, and we tried to practice these principles in all our affairs. I'm glad I figured that out, because I've never been perfect in practicing the principles. But I know today, and I have for quite a few years now, know that if I don't take AA home with me, I don't have anything going. I can be beautiful at the AA group. I can say all the right things and make you think I'm a real nice guy, but when I get home, that's where it is. And if I don't practice the program at home, I might as well forget about the rest of it, because I've had so many surrenders to make there. The surrender to alcohol was the simplest thing I ever did. When I got into surrendering major things of having my way, which is basically, every time I'm on a dry drunk, it's because I'm not getting my way. I did not want the toilet paper to come out from the top of the roll. It was very important to me that it come out the other way. I mean, we had more verbal discussions about that than you'd believe. It's very important that it come out the other way. Now, that hurt. That hurt to let her have her way and have that damn toilet paper coming out of the top of the roll. You know? Now, today I'd go and say, they're doing their toilet paper wrong, and it comes out the wrong way. So, that's kind of the way it was. Just one surrender after another. And I'm getting to the point where I enjoy it, because usually when I surrender, I win. Not recently, but after about 2 years sobriety, I went to Beverly's sponsor at the time, and Beverly also, besides burning food, was a lousy housekeeper. Now, I have to inject editorially right now at instructions of my murderous Al-Anon wife that she was not. It was my perception of what she was doing. She's really a very good housekeeper. Please note that I said that. But anyway, I, going to military school, wanted everything, racked up, the tall glasses at the back, dressed down, military style, dressed right and all that crap. And she wasn't going to do it that way. And pretty soon the linen closet would be all messed up, no military folds on the towels, just terrible, and glasses all over. It was awful. And her sponsor had come over one day and helped her hang some pictures, and she hadn't argued with Eloise a bit. Eloise would say, that's where it goes. She'd say, okay, and I'd nail the little thing. So one day, in a total, I had it about these dishes. I was hurting. By God, I called Eloise up. I didn't call her on the phone. I called her on the phone. I said, I've got to come see you. And I went out there, and I sat down with her, and she said, I was almost crying. I was, And I said, Eloise, you did so well with Beverly on the pictures. The next time she calls you, could you work the conversation around where she'll talk about the dishes so that you can come help her, show her how to put the dishes away? She looked at me and laughed. Al-Anons are cruel, cunning, baffling, and cruel. She said, Buddy Ross, we'd been married about 27 years at that time. I said, how long has Beverly been putting the dishes away, not to your way? I said, ever since we've been married, 27 years. She said, has it ever occurred to you that you have never given up the fact that you're going to change her in that area? No. I had never realized that I was powerless in that area. I was not going to surrender that particular deal because I was going to get those dishes put away, because every 3 months I'd put them away right. I'd call her in and say, this is the way it's supposed to be, and keep it that way. Damn it, and about 2 weeks, just total mess. She said, we're going to pray on that, and oh God, No other way to do it, just pray, okay. So right there in front of God and her, and nobody else was there, we got down by her coffee table, and we prayed, and we turned Beverly and the dishes and the linen closet over to God and about 7 other things. They weren't doing things right down at the Harbor Club, so I threw that in. And I was having some problems with business, so I just turned everything over. I was sponsoring one guy that I wasn't keeping sober, and so just turned that whole thing over. On the 3rd day, every morning, I just get down and say, God, I give you Beverly and the dishes, I give this, give that, and thy will be done, not mine, 3rd day, I was in the kitchen, and the way Beverly put dishes away, she would grab a handful out of the dishwasher. This was a beautiful symphony in action to watch. Just like a ballerina. And she would grab them, and she could hold more glasses in her hand than I ever believed possible. And she was in midair, getting ready to just shove them in the upper cabinet. And she turned around and looked at me, and she said, Buddy, these dishes are driving me crazy. One more time, would you show me how you want them put away? Now, I had been working 27 years, and it only took God 3 days. God, it's fun around our house. I like bananas. Beverly says she's living with a gorilla. And maybe sometimes that's true. And I also like oranges. And Beverly likes oranges. And I committed the grave error of eating her last orange one day. Now, Beverly's a teacher, ex-teacher, and it doesn't make any difference whether it's a pencil or a ruler or a butcher knife it looked like it was that long. It's really only about this long. And she said, Buddy Ross, I'm going to tell you something. Now, I forgot to tell you this, but she's the only woman I know that could use a fly zipper as a weapon. Because she used to dress me when I was drunk, and she wasn't too careful about everything being put away properly before she zipped that zipper up. So I was fearful for my life when she had that knife, whatever it was. And she said, don't you ever take my last orange. You can have all those damn bananas. You can have everything else, but don't you take my last orange. And I said, please put that knife away. She said, oh, I didn't even know I had a knife. And she puts it down. She said, but don't you get my last orange. And I said, believe me, I will not get your last orange. It's kind of like when she said, I want you to know, 10 years ago, she went to the first conference with me, which was the East Texas Roundup, and we went, and she said, now, buddy, I want you to understand, when I get down there, I don't want anybody to think I'm an Al-Anon. And I said, believe me, honey, nobody thinks you're an Al-Anon. You know? So anyway, Mother's Day was coming up, and so we played little tricks on these things. Because, see, today I know that it's got to be fun. I'm having more fun than I've ever had. If I wasn't having fun in here, I'd be out there still drinking. I'd be dead, of course. Because 60 days after I quit drinking, I had complete liver failure and almost died. Big deal. But I was in the hospital 21 days, and God saw fit for me to come back, maybe to do the mission that we did earlier this year. So Mother's Day came up. On the morning of Mother's Day, now, I committed a grave tactical error 39 and a half years ago on our honeymoon when I brought her some coffee. I've been doing it ever since, in bed in the morning. That may create some resentments with some of the husbands that aren't doing it, but it works. It's great. Anyway, that morning I did not take her coffee to her because I wanted her to get up and go into the kitchen and open the refrigerator and see her little surprise, which was I had bought 100 oranges or thereabouts. I had emptied that refrigerator and filled that mother with as many oranges as you could possibly get in there. Now, she picks up rubber stamps for me down at the Fort Worth Rubber Stamp Company, and I had them make a rubber stamp, and I had emblazoned on each orange, where it was very precisely put out there, "Bitch Beverly's orange, do not touch." Really, we do. The program, God has restored us. It's restored our marriage. About 3 years into the marriage, suddenly, I lost all feeling. One day Beverly said, something's wrong with the marriage, and I told her through a loud outburst of crying and tears and everything that I had no feeling for her. I didn't love her, I didn't hate her, there was nothing. And she's always been a book person, and she went to the library and got every book on divorce you could possibly get, how to divorce and get everything, how to divorce and kill the so-and-so, you know, how to divorce and remain friends, and I did not want a divorce. And we talked it over, and we decided that, and my sponsor said, well, your old marriage is dead now. Maybe you can let God give you a marriage that you're supposed to have. So we decided that we would let God rebuild our marriage, if it be His will, along the guidelines of the steps of AA and Al-Anon and the traditions. I'd heard Wesley Parrish talk about that time and realized that the traditions were just as important to me as the steps. And so we started that way. We started with the traditions. First of all, we had to become self-supporting. And we had taken subsidies from her parents all these years. We hadn't particularly asked for them, but we never turned them down. And we had to go to them and tell them that we would no longer accept any money from them, that we were self-supporting. And that gave us a lot of freedom I didn't realize. You can't have federal aid without federal control. And when we cut them off from giving us money, it gave us a relationship with them now that we couldn't have had any other way, because it's purely because we love each other and there's no money involved in that. They still give us things from time, but it's a different, totally different relationship. And I feel better about it. My self-esteem has come back because of the steps of this program. And we started other things. We have family meetings, and now, if we're doing something that we don't like, after she's cooled down past murder, or I've cooled down past murder, we will talk about it. And I will say, the other day when you did that, what did you mean? And she'll say this, and she'll say, what do you think I meant? And I said, well, this. She said, I never thought like that in my life. So we've learned to kind of work that out, and we can discuss things. And this is all according to, it's in the big book. It says someplace in there that after the bitterness of the fight is over, to sit down unemotionally and talk about it. Most of the time we have to write stuff down on paper. And I'm convinced that I can't do anything if I don't write it down on paper. I can't do a head job on it. So our relationship, God has seen fit to restore us to the point where, first of all, Beverly is my best friend. And second, she's my lover, and we're having the most exciting love affair today that we've ever had, and we've been married 39 and a half years. And that's a tribute to AA and Al-Anon. That's the only reason. I would rather be with Beverly than anybody in this world. I enjoy being with her. She's a safe wife for me, and I'm a safe husband for her, and that did not come easy. I can share anything with her and not be afraid of her retaliation and by the same thing. And that's just happened in about the last year and a half. And God is great to be vulnerable and to expose myself. I don't like this. One day Beverly said when she was talking, they told me in Al-Anon have sex in the bedroom again. And I thought, what in the hell, where have we been doing it? What they meant to say was have God in the bedroom with you, you know. But anyway, kind of a Freudian slip. And I said one time, Beverly and I, our marriage has been restored by practicing the 12 steps and the prejudices in our life, you know. And so anyway, it's just beautiful today, that relationship. And we're able to carry the message, trying to carry the message, because we are attracting people through our happiness and our joyfulness. Yesterday, she spoke at a garden club function, which is not an AA or an Al-Anon function, and she told her story. And it was well received. They told her it was the best talk they'd ever had at that thing. Those people outside our community of AA are hungry for what we have. Now, I do not practice personal anonymity in or out of the program. If I was ever so fortunate as to be on television, of course I would. But people know that I'm in AA. I'm the resident drunk at our church. We started an AA and Al-Anon meeting up there 5 years ago. It's a non-smoking meeting, and we let the non-smokers sit in front of the podium there instead. And anyway, you know, and we're just having a ball. I mean, it is just great. We're excited. We learn something new every day. And last January or February, I was talking to a guy, and he said, "How would you like to go to Russia?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah, they've got some vacancies in this next group of AA and Al-Anons that are going over to Russia. They've got a bad alcohol problem, and they want us to go over there and help them get a recovery program set up." And I said, "I don't have the money, but I know how my faith works, and I'm going to tell you, I don't know where it's coming from or anything, but we'll go." And he told me how much money we needed, and we prayed on it. And 3 days later, the funding was made available to us so that we could be on that trip. There were 19 of us. Beverly and me were anyway, we were the token couple. There were 19 altogether. We flew, and this is kind of, Beverly's anniversary for finding out what AA is all about was on April the 2nd of 1977 when we were at the East Texas Roundup. That's when she heard David's wife, Gracie, talk about feelings and everything, and Beverly switched. I mean, she had loved AAs to that point. She became an Al-Anon at that point. And 10 years to the day, we were winging our way to New York to go to Russia and try to carry the message of recovery that we have just given to us, you know, off the top of our hands. We got there. We went through Helsinki. They had an English-speaking meeting for us in Helsinki, the local group there. We met a guy by the name of Columbus. David may have met him. I don't know. And he's the guy that took AA to Finland several years ago, translated the book and everything. They call him Columbus. That's not his real name, and I'm not even going to try to pronounce it. But that's what it is. And they had an English-speaking meeting for us. And at their meetings, they last 3 hours. And if you don't get a chance to say all you want to say on the first round, you can have a second check at it. You know, after 3 hours, we were tired and we went home. But they also have bread, and they pass the bread around while you're, you know, and you have break bread together. It's a very symbolic. It's a beautiful feeling. But when they call it an English-speaking meeting, they are really stretching it, because I couldn't understand hardly anything they said, but they said it was English. So the next day, we went into Tallinn, which is in Estonia, across the Bay of Finland. I had never seen the ice like they had it there in the harbor at Helsinki. It was April. It was just beginning to thaw. They had icebreakers that went through. It's kind of like ruts on a country road. You could just see where they go. And this big ferry boat went from Helsinki to Tallinn every day. It carried about 2,000 people and had 15 bars on it. And, I mean, everybody got there drunk except the 19 of us. We had more 12-step possibilities than we've ever seen in our life. And we were all wearing these yellow pins that said sobriety in Russian and in English. And I meant to wear one tonight. I forgot it. And we got there, and one of the places we went was the Anabakis deal down at Tartu, which is where their university is. And we went down there for a day and met with this group. It's the only one in Russia that we're aware of that have had sobriety for 20 years or more there. And we met with them, and we met with the wives. And Beverly was able to convey the message to this wife about Al-Anon and left an ODAT and some of those things. And when we left there, and there's a language barrier, even with an interpreter, but we had the feeling, we knew what it was, and they were so grateful to see us, and they were grateful to see people from another country that weren't drinking and enjoying life. And they have a most unusual program. They don't use a step program like we do. But anyway, when we got back on the bus, Beverly said, Al-Anon's won, AA nothing, because she had started an Al-Anon group, and we hadn't done too well at that point. Then we went on to Leningrad and saw all the tourist attractions, but the most exciting thing there, and I, of course, am being very brief, and I would love to visit on a one-to-one basis and answer your questions later if you want to, but for the sake of time, I don't want to do it now. I'll just briefly skim over the thing. In Leningrad, we did the tourist things, but we met in the homes at nighttime with members that had been recruited, so to speak, by the first trip, which had been a year earlier. And the way we would do, the first thing when we got to Leningrad, they said, now we got to go learn how to ride the subways. Now their subway trains are absolutely spotless. They're works of art. And if you've ever ridden a roller coaster standing up, that's the way their escalators are. I mean, and they go down, and they're fast. But everything's clean. You don't see any graffiti or anything. But anyway, in this mass of people, just thousands in the subway station going every way, suddenly we heard this guy say, Sarah, 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 started yelling and waving. Nobody in our group was named Sarah, but he came over and embraced us, and he said, you're back, you're back. And it turns out he had been talked to by the first group, and the leader of that was a gal named Sarah Siebold. And so he was looking for her, but he said, I've been sober for a year. I've got God in my life. I mean, he was just going wild. And said, you've got to come and have dinner with me tonight and everything. So we arranged to go with him and with several others, and we broke up into little groups. And just as we got back to the hotel, there was a woman waiting outside for us, and she wanted to find out about sobriety. So we said, well, we're going out tonight, and we'll let you meet some of the other people. We get to the subway station, and there's Max, this very vocal dissident that we went to his house for dinner, or a house of a guy he had sponsored. And we met there in the subway station, and they saw that woman, and nobody knew her, and we had to break off and send 2 people with her because they thought she was probably KGB, and they did not want to risk what they had, so they had to go off by themselves. Another thing, and then we went to Max's, but this guy that had run across the thing was named Sergei, and so Sergei had them go to a little, it wasn't an in-tourist restaurant, it was just one of the little local, we had total carte blanche to go any place we wanted to. We did not feel that we were under any surveillance or any restrictions. They just turned us loose. And so they went, but this group went with Sergei to this little Russian restaurant, and he was in this back room kind of, and he was sharing about his spiritual experience, in Christ and everything, and the owner of the restaurant came in and said, that's verboten, or that's German, anyway, said, that's anti-Soviet, you can't talk like that, you get out of here. And so they went outside and finished their thing, and the next day he lost his job. And he came to the hotel outside. They don't let him in the hotel, but he met us outside, and tears were just coming down his face. And he said, I can get another job, but said, I am so grateful that you've given me my sobriety. And we read in the big book, some guy says, I've got to catch a bus to go to a meeting, or I might have to drive across town to go to a meeting. And it says, job or no job, wife or no wife, our sobriety must come first. And here's this man in Russia, and we can turn around and go to an AA meeting any place. And what we had given him was the gift of life and the gift of a spiritual life. The in-tourist guide for one of the previous things called us in the lobby at the Leningrad hotel where we were and said, our whole life is different. The last group, we've got experience now. We're spiritual. We've got this. Oh, she was just excited. And she wanted to get with us, but she had another group to take, and she couldn't. Just over and over and over situations like that. Beverly went to dinner with a party member and an English teacher. I don't know where he was in the party, but anyway, he said, you can't believe what they're saying in the paper. And what's that? I said, well, they're telling us all these lies about Jim and Tammy Baker. And Beverly said, no, it's true. So they don't believe, even the party members don't believe everything they read. But we went to a hospital in Moscow, a treatment center, and in the interpretation, we were talking about having brain damage, and this interpreter said we had leaking brains, and they just loved it. So now we have leaking brains instead of brain damage. Just over and over and over again, this experience. And we would ride the subways, and we had this group leader that was 14 years sober, and she was rather bosomy, and she had a sobriety chip on a medallion right here with 14 years on it, and she would get in the subway. Now this is kind of like Diana Ross and the Supremes. See, Beverly and the Al-Anons would sit across on this thing, and they'd just kind of wiggle in between these Russians, and then Mary would sit there a minute, and then she would look at them, and find out the most logical prospect, and they're really friendly once you start talking to them. They're very warm, delightful people. She would say, mais je vous Mary, 14 years, and she had pointed at this medallion, net vodka, net vino. When she'd say that, I'd say, net vino? Net vino. God, and they said, no kidding. And about that time, Beverly and these other two Al-Anons would get up and just start handing out literature up and down the subway, about it. You felt like they'd be doing a song and dance or something, and just over and over, experiences like that. And we felt totally sheltered over there. When we got back to the free world, so to speak, we had to start checking our pocketbooks to make sure our pockets hadn't been picked. And I said, you must have severe punishment over here. And the guy said, it's not the severity, it's the certainty. They will jack around with a lot of appeals processes. If you do something wrong, they get you. So anyway, it was a delightful experience in attempting to carry the message, and we were pleased to find out that on June the 6th that an AA group was registered in Moscow. In the interest of time, I could go on for hours, so I won't do that, but Beverly and I will be around for the rest of the weekend. We'd love to share with you on a one-to-one basis. I've learned a lot of things about living, but I never learned until I got here what it took, and most of it is keeping my mouth shut. And I'll just pass along a couple of little things that Beverly and I have used in our relationship that keeps things going. I told you, when we cool down past murder, there's a certain phrase that we've taken out of our relationship, and that is, I can't believe. We don't say that to each other anymore. We just don't say anything, but never, I can't believe. When that phrase is taken out of our relationship, we don't have as many arguments. It's just finding out the things that push our buttons that we don't need to do. And just one thing after another. But this has been a great experience. And as I said at the first, I have untreated alcoholism, and our fifth tradition says the primary purpose of the group is to carry the message to the alcoholic who still suffers, and that's not necessarily a wet alcoholic. I appreciate the treatment that you've given me this evening, and I hope maybe something I've shared with you will help your journey, this beautiful journey of sobriety, be better. And again, Dan, thank you for inviting me.